it just kind of takes over the conversation, and everybody just wants to know. They just want to know what he's doing, why he's doing it, who's looking at him, will he move to a particular club? So there are all the conversations that happen all the time. And I think there's a necessity in many ways, because you do have to focus on this solely in terms of if you want to get there as an individual.
Welcome to Behind the Boots. This is a podcast where we get the unique and rare opportunity to explore youth football from a parent perspective.
Yeah, we are very excited today to welcome Les Smith Rowe. Hi, Les.
Hi, how are you doing? Morning.
Good, thank you. And for those people who don't know you, Les, you have 3 children, one of which is Emile Smith Rowe, who plays for Arsenal and is also an England international. So we're going to get into what it's been like to support his journey and your family's journey along the way. But you yourself has a semi-pro sort of playing career as well. Is that right, Les?
Yeah, so like a lot of young boys at the time, was rather than run around the streets, my father said you need to do something, and that was football really more than anything else. So Sunday league football starting, and then school football, then district, and then later on in my career I played semi-pro football, not at a very high level, but it was useful in terms of kind of understanding kind of the discipline that's needed alongside working as well. So that was quite useful from that perspective.
Absolutely. And do you think having that experience of playing football at that level has been a help or hindrance in terms of helping Emile to navigate his journey and support him through that?
It's been a bit of both, really, in many ways. So from the positive aspect, then it was, so I started playing Sunday league football, and I played in a tremendous side. I played with Ian Wright, Danny Wallace. They're all ex-pros. We've been friends from childhood. We're still in contact. So from that point of view, it was really good. And I played against people like Paul Elliott, many other pros as well. And we're all kind of from South London, and we're all kind of from that generation as well. So from that perspective, it was really good, because later on I could kind of utilize some of their knowledge and some of their experiences, because obviously I went and watched them play professionally, and you get kind of a bit of an insight, which is a little bit different from semi-pro football, because it's that much more kind of demanding, and then it's your full-time job as opposed to kind of an income supplementation, as it were. So from that point of view, it's good. But then the other point of view is kind of, you are kind of trying to hold yourself back from thinking, come on, you've got to work a bit harder. Come on, you've got to, so you're kind of trying to balance the two, really.
Great. And then sort of back in the day, when you sort of talk about those names of the guys that you used to play with, and obviously a number of them have gone on to do great things in football. Were their parents on the sidelines? Were your parents on the sidelines? Like, what was it like back then? And
So my parents were on the sidelines. Danny, most certainly, his mum would be there every so often. His older brothers would be around. So he had an older brother, but he had 2 younger brothers who went on to play professional football, Rodney and Raymond, the twins. So they went on to play, and they used to come and watch us as tiny toddlers. But back then. So I was born in 1964. So the mindset then, what exactly? Yeah,
Don't look.
I'm just 21.
21.
But people didn't really see football as not such a way out, but they didn't see it as a profession. So quite often, a lot of my friends' parents were really, really demanding about football was just something you did for fun. It wasn't something you were going to go on to do, and you had to focus on either getting some sort of career or learning a trade, or because footballers didn't get paid quite as well. They still got paid more in relative terms, but it's nothing like the explosion in football and the wages that the players receive, today. So yeah, you tended to be guided towards education and a trade, or some sort of employment, really, rather than football.
What do you feel like with Emile? So Emile's, you've got your kids now. Is it your older son? Did he play football as well? Did you?
Yeah, he did for a while. And he played in a very successful school side, but he was more academic and got to a point where he felt like that was his route rather than football. And that was a wise choice for him in terms of, then he went on to university, did really, really well, and works for some really successful companies and is doing really, really well in his own right. And I think that's important as well for your other children, because the journey with a professional athlete is, just takes up all the energy, really. And so it's important that your other children are kind of doing their own thing in their own right, and that they're rewarded for it. And you go to all the stuff that is good for them in terms of, being at school when they're doing really well, kind of rewarding them in the same kind of way, kind of talking about them as well. And that's difficult as well, because, everybody wants to talk about the professional athlete. It's just a balance.
How do you get that
you have
balance?
got other kids.
Yeah. How
you don't
how
always
do
you don't always get it right. You don't always get it right. I mean, there are times, when you do have to kind of either be told or kind of knock your head against the wall thinking, I haven't done enough here, or, I haven't talked enough about, my other children, because everybody just asks you about the one individual. And that can be quite tough. Yeah.
I mean, I've only got the one, Les, and sometimes I just get sick of having to talk about it. Stop. It's quite hard to navigate the conversation, actually, because that is the go-to, how so-and-so, or, when he's in the room, how's your football going, Miles?
Yeah.
And it's actually quite hard to steer the conversation into kind of other angles.
The thing is as well is that, whilst your other children are achieving along the way, when you've got an athlete that, is in a really big side, getting England call-ups really early, every day there's a new story written about you, and people believe in what you're going to achieve, and and that just really does just take up all the energy, really, in many ways. It can be good as well. I mean, in terms of, it's nice to be associated with somebody that's doing really well as well. But the thing is about that is that everybody can achieve in their own right at anything they want to do. It's just that football is such a big global phenomenon, really. It just kind of takes over the conversation, and everybody just wants to know. They just want to know what he's doing, why he's doing it, who's looking at him, will he move to a particular club? So they're all the conversations that happen all the time. And I think there's a necessity in many ways, because you do have to focus on this solely in terms of if you want to get there as an individual. It's then just about how you manage kind of your other siblings and all the other bits going. You miss out on lots of stuff, like I miss out on lots of dinners with friends and lots of, parties that were going on because we had a game the next day. So you do miss out on stuff, because it's impossible to get to every event and still travel all over the country or all around the world sometimes, because it's just so demanding. And I think you have to kind of go with what's good for them. I mean, it's a bit like Emile, he was more sporty. So, there were conversations about, do we push him down the sporty route and just go with that? Or do we have to try and find a balance between school? And you try and find that balance, but actually, in order to make it, you have to be exceptional to be able to do the two alongside each other, and there are, and I'm not saying Emile's not exceptional, because he is, in order to have got to where he's got, but sometimes you cannot always juggle everything. Some people are able to do that. Emile was more focused on kind of, this is really where my interest lies. This is kind of what I want to do. I'll do the school bit as well, but this is my main focus. And some people, some parents may not go with that. Some parents think the risk is too high, and I get that as well. I get that as well. I don't knock people for that, but I do feel that you have to let people kind of explore what they're really interested into, up to the point where they realize it's not going to happen, and then maybe they can focus on something else.
I think do you think it's the parents perhaps need to feel okay about the fact that your youngster can change their mind?
Yeah, I mean, look, so I've worked in children's social care for 40 odd years, and my main remit now is around education. So for me, when I'm looking at individuals and thinking kind of, what are your strengths and what are your areas of development, you're thinking, well, if this is your real thing that you're interested in, then let's go with that. We can put other stuff around it, as you go along. But I feel you have to get people's interest first, because I think without them buying in, or without their interest, they're not going to do it anyway, or they're going to do it under duress, and then they don't give 100%. That's my opinion. I don't say everyone should go along with it, but I just feel like you can interact with people easier when they've bought into an idea and maybe it's come from them rather than people saying this is what you have to do because I think it's the best idea for you. I believe that people are the experts in themselves more so than other people telling you, even though they might be your children. And I think
so agree with that.
People can struggle with that.
Oh, so good. I mean, I've got a daughter and she's only 6, but she does karate, and I think she's really good at karate. And she's like, I don't want to do karate anymore. I don't like karate. And I'm like, stay karate. It's quite a, do you? Because I've seen kids, they kind of go through like, especially that age, they go through these things like that, don't they? Where they're like, I don't want to go, and then they love it again, and then and it's that sort of balance, isn't it? Of like, okay, well, just do it this term and see how you feel at the end of the term, like, because I paid for the term. But yeah, I feel like keeping that balance with. Did you find that with Emile, you never had to kind of try and get him to training, or was there ever that kind of sense that this might not be what he wanted to do from young?
Yeah, no, they all go through difficult moments on their journey. And, Emile was written about this, so it's not as if I couldn't talk about it. He wrote about it in a program a little while back, just saying there was a time when he just wanted to give the game up, the pressure was immense. And then, we're always our harshest critics as well. So if we feel we're not doing that well, it comes down even harder, and actually the feedback that you're getting sometimes could be misinterpreted. And sometimes it's constructive criticism. But then you get all the external stuff, maybe online or other people saying you're not good enough or whatever. And I think that was one of the struggles for Emile at that point in time, and we had that discussion about, if you really, really are struggling with it and you really don't want to do it, that's fine. We've had a good journey along the way. You've achieved a fair amount at this point. And if you really come to the end of it, you can go back to just playing football for fun. And he went away and he thought about it, and he came back and just said, I want to have another go at it. But I feel like it is important to kind of give people space to kind of make those decisions for themselves. But also, if I turned around and said to him, no, you've got to do this because we've sacrificed blah, 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 then I don't necessarily feel that would have been a help. I don't know whether he would have still came back with the same answer because we can't know that.
Sure.
And what age was that, Les? Sorry, what age?
Yeah, he was 14 at the time. Yeah, and he was doing very well. It wasn't like he wasn't doing well, but I think it's about how you feel yourself about how you're doing is important as well. But you need the right messages coming back to you as well. I think are important. So when you get to those maybe low moments, what can you do to kind of help someone get through it rather than berating them or saying, well, you owe me this, or because I've done that. And I think you have to kind of remember it's their journey, and that's difficult as well because there's times when I've had to pull myself back and actually it's your journey, and I can guide you. I shouldn't really be telling you or coaching you into what you should do, and that it's a fine balance.
Have you had to consciously think about supporting the mental side of supporting Emile through that journey? Have you had to we call it the inner game, but yeah, in terms of performance, well-being, resilience, has there been anything you've had to consciously think about?
Yeah, about not being. I mean, because I am ultra competitive. I'm ultra competitive. So when the boys were growing up, I would teach them all the methodology about winning a game. What it took and stuff. And people would quite often say to me, "Oh, just let them play the game for fun." And I'd be like, "Well, it's great playing for fun, but ultimately, when you start a game, surely the end game must be to try and win it." And then after that period of time, you come off the pitch, you can shake hands, you can say well done to each other, and you try harder the next time, or you stay focused and the other person has to try harder to be in it. So from that perspective, I'm I don't know, stuff like Othello or games like that, I would say to them, you don't really want to go there. Have a little think about it. A bit like chess, so you're going to make a move, but have you thought about some of the options? Rather than just doing it and seeing what the outcome is. And yes, you could learn from that, but just take time to have a think about why you're doing it, why you're making that. And then if you still want to make it, that's fine, because then you'll learn you know, and you can think back about why that didn't. So I was always ultra competitive like that. So I was always kind of saying to them, you know, have a think about that, and then come back to it. And so they grew up quickly, kind of thinking that's how it was, and they know me as being, all my friends know me as being an ultra competitive. You know, they always struggle to kind of keep up with, you know, because I'm just prepared to run further and faster and longer and do whatever it takes to kind of win the game. So that was always my mentality as a child. I was always kind of the one who would run the extra mile, would, you know, and just do it because I just wanted to outlast people, because I knew I could win games like that. Because when you're, you know, unless you're ultra talented at something, you know, you have to just work hard.
Yeah.
And so I realized that I was fairly talented, but I could see people around me that are much more talented, but I just outworked them. That's all. I just outworked them. And so, you know, I could win games just through sheer determination and hard work. You know, and it wasn't necessarily talent. There was talent there, but talent and hard work, I think, is a good combination.
Yeah. And I do as well. But so does anything, because you know the game, and again you've got that ethos of what drives you. Did anything or any time were you ever in conflict of what, you know, he was being taught at the club, because you know so much? Was it ever an issue?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it was an issue. Like, you know, I've got really good relationships with everybody at Arsenal. We've had a couple of battles with them, but that wasn't really about kind of what they were coaching. It was a couple of scenarios with just members of staff, really. But they were easily resolved because, you know, like, I work in a professional organisation. You know, I'm not the person that would go into Arsenal and jeopardise that for my son in terms of, you know, going in and blowing my top. You know, you would make sure that you did things properly. You ask for the meeting, you sit down, you discuss situations, you have the twos and fro's. You know, you give your side of the story, they give theirs, and then you try and meet somewhere in the middle. Because I think what that's meant is, on the journey and along the way, you can then, those people are then approachable then, you know, far more easily than if you go in and just, you know, constantly at loggerheads with people. And so I've got very good relationships with everybody at Arsenal. You know, I still get supported by them with lots of stuff in the community. I mean, I guess the other thing I should say is, because I've worked in the borough for 20 odd years, I already had links with Arsenal's community team way before Emile was even a footballer. So I was already doing stuff with Arsenal in the community, with the care leavers that I work with. I think I told you we went to Brazil. We did the 2-part documentary with the girls, you know, and so I'd already built good links with them anyway. And so then it was just a continuation. Of course, when Emile became the footballer and then went on to become a professional, it just meant that was it. It just cemented some of the work I'd done on the ground anyway. And so they knew who I was, the work I did. And so when I continue to do stuff like my giving back stuff, working with kind of, you know, various clothing brands and stuff to incentivize young people, that's not an issue for me. I can go to Arsenal and say, you know, could you support me with this? You know, could we use the hub for something? It's not an issue for me now.
Okay. So just homing in on that piece about relationships, and I think that's really helpful for parents who are on the journey now. Tell us what you've experienced perhaps with other parents, and what you've witnessed in terms of relationships, and what you think the impact that can have. Because I think we all have different ideas and views about how we should approach situations when we're in academy. So what have you seen, and how could you sort of,
I mean, I just think people get very anxious a lot of the time. They get very anxious around, obviously, retain and release. That's really an anxious period for people. And I get why that is, because people have invested a lot of time, effort, you know, they've sacrificed in terms of the stuff I talked about earlier, in terms of, you know, missing time out with friends and family sometimes as well, you know. And so I get that people become very, very anxious about it. But, you know, there is no guarantee in life in anything that we do, you know, and also, you know, do we invest quite so much when we're just taking our children to a table tennis club or to a tennis club, or football has this way of sucking you in and making you think that just because I'm in the system, it's just route one to the top. And that's just not true of most things in life, really. You need a huge amount of luck. You need talent. You need opportunity. And sometimes that opportunity can come in the way of someone else's misfortune, in terms of someone getting injured. You get a game, you show, and you're the next best thing, you know. So all of those factors have to come into play for you in the first instance, you know, in order to make that journey along the way. Well, what you can do, really, as a parent, is to try and trust. I mean, it's trust in the process if you want to, because without it, you can jeopardize your child. And you know, some parents will probably look back and think, actually, I could have done that a lot better, and maybe that did have an effect on my child's journey. And I think I've definitely seen that on a few occasions. I'm sure many other parents have seen it, and I think if we're honest with ourselves, we've all had scenarios where we can look back and think, actually, I could have handled that a little bit better.
I was just thinking of one for myself. I
Yeah.
was like,
yes,
well,
exactly.
I love what you're saying, because, you know, all around the sort of retainer, really, I've got this sort of saying in my head: out of anxiety, we tend to overdo things. And I feel like, you know, I remember with my son, and he didn't get a call up into a club or anything, and he sort of really lost confidence. And because I saw that, and I saw the way he was playing football, like he just sort of went into a little shell. And I'm still there in grassroots, you know, 3 or 4 times a week, just kind of watching him, observing him, training and playing. Right, he's not free anymore. You know, there's almost like when they're really young, they just play freely and they're having fun.
Yes.
And there's this point, and I just got so anxious about it, and I kind of overdid it. I look back now, I think, oh, I was just sort of on him a bit too much, you know, trying to get involved and help. And actually, you know, I look back now and I think, actually stepping away from him and just maybe the odd little comment, but, you know, it's that sometimes you just go in too hard, don't you?
It's hard though, isn't it? Because you know, you want your child to do well in anything they do, you know, and like, you know, some people, you know, start, you know, having tutors for their children at through 3, 4 years of age. Are they wrong to do it? You know, you might say that, you know, that's a lot of pressure to put on a child, because then what are the expectations moving forward from there? Where do you have to go? You know, and how do you keep building upon it? Some children can manage that kind of pressure, but the thing is we're not all the same, and it's a bit like a football team. You know, they're made up of very different personalities. Age-wise, they vary across the, you know, and so you need to manage each individual in the right way. So you have to home into the things that make them tick. So, you know, some players, and I've seen it in semi-pro games, they need a real kick up the arse at halftime. Some players, you need to just put your arm around them and say, look, carry on with that, you're doing brilliant. Another player, so it's about trying to work out what's best for an individual. And sometimes as parents, we just think we know it all, and actually we don't. In my opinion, you know, I think we can learn from others, and because if you're not open to learning, then I think you're just going to get stuck in a rut, which it can be successful, but it can also be quite devastating for the child and the parent-child relationship as well if it goes pear-shaped.
Yeah. So, you know, when Emile was younger, and obviously you've got, again, very experienced in the football world, did you do like the extra training stuff from a young age? Because there's lots of schools of thought, isn't there? Some people will start very young, extra, others will not. What was your
So
plan,
I think we said, so like I started Emile like at clubs that were very, very kind of low down the scale, because I really wanted to kind of, when I realized he really wanted to play football, because again, I played football, I didn't want to push him into it. And so he pretty much came by it himself. I used to give the boys, you know, table tennis bats, you know, badminton rackets. When we'd go on holiday, we'd always go to places where there was lots of sport going on that we could take place, that we could take part in. Sorry, and then, you know, that's how it was. And then he came by football. I said to him, "Do you really want to play?" He said, "Yes." I found a team that was kind of, you know, pretty much not doing much at all. It was just fun. And I just thought that was a good way to start, really, see where he was. And if he kind of swam and he got top, and we kind of was thinking, well, maybe we could push him on a bit, that's what we do. So we did. And he did extremely well in the first team he played in. You know, it was like most are those players that, you know, tend to get picked out for academies. They tend to just kind of rise above the group around them. There's always one or two in a team, you know. And so that the end of that year, I just sort of said to him, you know, do you fancy another challenge, you know? And he just said, yes, why not? So we moved on. Again, it was the same thing. He rose to the top of that. You know, he was scoring more goals than anybody else. But it wasn't just about goal scoring, because his all-round ability to kind of see the game. You know, he give away more goals than he could have scored just by passing sideways to someone, you know. And he saw that in the game. You know, he saw a lot. And, you know, sometimes I do think it was kind of like the, you know, kind of me getting him to think about how games are played. They're not just about an individual going and doing it all on their own. They are sometimes thinking about what's the best move, you know, here. So yes, I could take a chance at trying to squeeze it in a really tight space in the goal. But actually, I've got a friend there who's like right in front of the goal. I just pass it to him. It's going to be a goal, you know. And I used to say, I had lots of mantras for him about, you know, it doesn't matter who scores as long as we win, for instance, was one of the things I used to say to him a lot. It doesn't matter who scores as long as the team win. Does it matter if you gave 5 passes to the side and got 5 assists, or whether you got 5 goals? If you walk off winners, it doesn't matter how that happens. And it would be stuff like, you know, I'd say stuff to him like, you know, the ball can move quicker than you can run. So if you get the ball and you knock it 10 yards to someone, you just run around the other side and get it back again. It's easier than trying to kind of get into battles with people. Now, eventually you do have to get into one-on-one battles. But when you're young, you know, quite often just knocking, and not many people were doing that. So he would just be knocking the ball around, getting it back, knocking it around, getting it back again. And so he stood out from that perspective, not necessarily because he had loads of skills and step over and stuff, because he never really got into that until a little bit later. But he was able to just pick out passes and just make the game look fairly simple. And so that's how he progressed really through Sunday League football. And then, of course, he had already been scouted at 5, 5.5, 6. And every time he went into academies, it was really, Dad, I don't really like this. I just want to play football. It's like all, you know, drills and knocking it through cones. And so he'd go in, he'd come out, he'd go in, he'd go out. You know, it's like, until, you know, really about 9, when he went to Chelsea. And he, I mean, there are different teams have different personalities. Chelsea, they were big on one-to-one battles and winning those battles all the time. And Emile, because he kind of focused more on passing, that probably didn't fit with their kind of remit. And whilst they really liked him, they couldn't make a decision about him, about kind of, could they get him to do those other bits? He's already got, you know, the basics, but could he do the other bits? And so they had their time with him. They couldn't make a decision. So I just said to him, look, thanks very much. I'll take him back to Sunday League football. You can keep an eye on him if you want to. And interestingly enough, it was another parent whose son used to play with him in Sunday League football, actually. And then he went into the academy a bit earlier. He was goalkeeper. He left Chelsea, went to Arsenal. When they heard that we'd walked from Chelsea, pretty much, she spoke to somebody at Arsenal. They phoned. We went up for a trial, and they pretty much signed him within a week or so. I think they just said, "Does he want to go on a trip?" So that's kind of how it worked for him.
So when he went on that period at Arsenal, sort of trialing, was it obvious to you and the family that actually he felt comfortable there, different to his experience at maybe Chelsea?
I think it was a bit of age as well, and also I think, you know, maybe that I mean, this is me kind of hypothesizing really, but maybe that experience at Chelsea of kind of like, I was ready for it, but then actually I didn't get taken on. Maybe that was a factor for him when he went to Arsenal, thinking, actually, I've really got to give this as much as I can. And I don't know whether I'm just hypothesizing about what might have happened there. But he settled in and when I say settled in, I mean, it's difficult to settle into academy squads when you've come straight out of Sunday League football, because the boys are so much faster, so much fit. Some of the boys have been there since they were 5, you know, so they've got 4 years of that extra coaching, of those training sessions, and it takes a while for you to get up to speed with them. And so it does take everybody, and you can see, you'll have noticed this yourselves, when they bring in new boys, you know, you can see what they've got, but they're just kind of a little bit slow. They're a little bit off the pace a bit. You know, they're breathing harder much earlier because they don't have it in their legs in the same way.
Yeah.
You know?
They're thinking, oh, that Sunday league was easy, but this, what?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So yeah, and then that's when you start to realize, do I really want to do this? And that it might be 2 or 3 times a week I've got to do this, and then a game at the weekend, and then that's when it starts to get, oh, we're really in like the system now, you know, away from my friends that I've known for years, you know, having to make new friends, knowing that there are kind of like little groups that have played together for ages, and they tend to pass the ball to each other more so, and you have to kind of break into that and be trusted by the group, you know, and so that can be quite hard.
Les, at that point, like, how can a parent help? Because it must be quite tough on a young person to, like going to a new school, isn't it? Like you said, and how do you? Because it might be that a child might feel, oh my goodness, this is just too much. That it's not fun. How? Because it's so early too. We know as parents to give things time, but what can we do with those early days, weeks where a child is trying to step
personally,
in?
I think it's too early at 5. I mean, I think taking boys in at 5 and girls in 6 and 7, it's just, I think it's too early. However, every child is different, and some children can manage that. So, but for real, it was too early. Again, other factors. So, and there was a summer-born baby, for instance. So, you know, when you talk to some parents about some parents don't even understand what that means. You know, and I'm not saying they should understand, because if they haven't got a summer-born baby, would they know that they lag a little bit behind? You know, how would you know unless you're in the profession, say, for instance? And so there are all these factors, and for Emile, I think that was a factor. You know, he was 9 months younger than the oldest boy in his group, and that's a lot. So I never used to judge Emile kind of at that point in time. So at the end of the season, I wouldn't judge him and say, you know, where was he in comparison to the boys? I'd have to wait until 9 months on to see where he was, because he still had that development to make. And so the younger boys can look like they're a little bit behind, but as time goes by, so the gap kind of narrows a bit. But
I can relate to that. Even I'm born 28th of August, so even at school.
I'm 27th of August, so yeah, exactly. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I know that very, very well myself, being one. But again, I think that's why I then had to try that much harder. And that's probably why I had to run. So when I was ever playing against boys, they were always a little bit bigger, a little bit older, a little bit stronger. And so that's why probably where I got that determination from, was to work really hard and just outwork people.
Wow, that's really interesting, isn't it? So Les, you were telling us before in a previous conversation, you're obviously from South London, you mentioned that, and you eventually moved to North London to help facilitate and support Emile in that journey. What was the deciding factor on doing that? Because that's a big commitment. It's a big adjustment, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we were in a position where our older son was just going off to university. So it meant that we had some flexibility. It meant that we only really had Emile at home then. And we could take the chance. So, I mean, look, so my journey was, I'd leave Thornton Heath, you know, really early in the morning. I'd commute into Islington. I'd work. I'd leave early. I'd come back to Thornton Heath, pick the car up, pick Emile up, drive all the way to Walthamstow. He'd do the training session, eating on the way, changing in the car. Parents know this inside. I'm not, you know, teaching them anything new. But then you do the same thing back. You know, when you're getting back home at 10:30, sometimes 11 at night, depending on what the traffic was. You know, having to pick your son up and carry him up to bed, asleep in the early days. You know, put him to bed knowing that he's got to do the same thing the next day. That's hard work on everybody. You know, and it wasn't just me. Obviously, my partner was sharing it with me as well. So. So that was harsh on everybody, and also it's harsh on you. The other children, because in the early days, of course, you know, Jamal would have to be coming to most games. You couldn't just leave him at home, or you can just leave him with me. So that there was that as well. That's how it kind of affects your other siblings, in as much as they have to go along with the journey in many ways. And so it just made sense for us to kind of move closer. Yet, was it a risk? Yes, but I mean, we're both professionals. We owned our own property. We're luckier than other people. So if we didn't own a property, we wouldn't have been able to have done it. We've had to continue with it. So we were fortunate from that point of view. Did we know it was going to work out? No. But do you want your children to do the best they can? Yes. And so you do stuff that can help them.
And look where it got you.
Well, I mean, again, you need a huge amount of luck, and you need the right opportunities to come your way, and you need people to buy into you, and to believe in you as well.
Yeah.
And what do you see in Emile that you've been surprised by, you've been impressed by? Because I feel like often when we talk to you, it comes from within them, right? This kind of drive to get to the top of this game.
Yeah, I mean, look, having a dad like me cannot be easy.
Oh no!
Self-confessed.
Right. Because I am like I just hold really high standards for myself, and I think maybe that did rub off on the boys. Like I'm so determined to win at everything. Like I want to do everything in the right way, and I want to be the best that I can, and that can be quite hard on your children. You don't necessarily realize it, when you're going through it, and maybe this is a bit of self-reflection as well as you get older. Emile has a quiet confidence, unlike me, where I just totally 100% believe in my ability at beating most people at anything I do. Because unless you're a professional, you got to work your socks off to beat me at it. You've got to really work your socks off. And so I'm sure that had some kind of bearing on him, thinking, oh, I've got, in order to impress my dad, I've got to work really. But he's got a really quiet kind of confidence, and the analogy I use with this is, you can be either of those personalities and get to the top, right? If you think about, I don't know, Bjorn Borg and Jimmy Connors, or McEnroe, or Sampras and Nadal, Djokovic, quiet ones and out ones, but they still all rose to the top, and they've done amazing things. So you can be either, and still get there. So you can be the one who just 100% believes in this, or I'm sure that McEnroe thought that no one should ever be you. But then you had his nemesis on the other side. You had people like Bjorn Borg, who's very, very quiet, and he just went about his business in the right way. Never really got into any scandals or anything, and won as many as anybody else. So you can be either one. That doesn't necessarily matter.
Do you think, I mean, have you and Emile ever had conversations about the sort of football dad that you were? Is there any self-reflection going on?
I'm sure he thought I told him too much. Yeah. And they do get to a point actually where you can't really help them anymore. When I say that, I mean it becomes it actually goes against the grain of what they're being taught. And so you can actually harm them in many ways, because if you keep trying to coach them and I was one of those dads. I used to coach from the side, but you as time goes by, you learn that you can't, and then after your son's told you a few times, Dad, stop talking, you always I need to stop doing that, as hard as it seems, because two things. One is that when I open my mouth, my son hears my voice. He looks around. It's what he's known all his life. That's distracting. But secondly, I didn't get to play professional football, so my knowledge is limited in many ways. And so the coaches are trying to coach a system that and an ethos that the club have. And the best way for your son to navigate their system is to go along with that. Because if you do something completely opposite to what they're trying to teach you, what are your chances? It would be a bit like, sending your child to school and saying to him, don't worry about what they're teaching you, because, I can teach you something. Well, then homeschool them. Why send them into a system that is trying to teach them and prepare them for one thing, and you're doing the complete opposite? You have a choice in it.
We're all about that on this thing, because it often feels like, you often hear like either the extreme of it's such a sacrifice, driving everywhere. And it's like we forget it's a choice. No one's forcing anyone to be involved in this journey, right?
Yes.
I think what's so beautiful is even as you're talking, you know, I've got a 9-year-old who is so competitive. I cannot even, everything for him is about winning. I mean, even just getting to the fridge.
Sounds like me.
Third boy, Les, and he's just gonna win no matter what. And as the mum, I'm not so, I wouldn't say I never played competitive sport particularly. I'm not that competitive, so I'm just like, just enjoy it, just have, and he's almost like, just don't talk to me, I want to win. And I struggle with that a bit. And what you're saying as well, it sort of opens my mind to, I just sort of enjoy that in him as well, you know, enjoy that real like competitive.
Yeah, and I think the thing is life is competitive in many ways. You know, you have to compete for jobs, you have to compete for, you know, many things that you do in life, you have to compete for. In, you know, it's like, might not be I can run 100 meters faster than you, but you've got to try and prove that, you know, you're better than all the other applicants, for instance, that are applying for a job. And what does that look like? You know, and so it's about kind of the balance as well, that it doesn't become all consuming, because it can become all consuming when you're that focused on winning the whole time. It can become consuming. It's trying to get a balance, but without that driving force, sometimes that driving force can just get you over those hard things. Because some boys and girls are so kind of into the fact that, you know, they want to be and can be the best. That gets them further to a point. Then it becomes about kind of the hard work ethic as well, because Chelsea's thing is, you know, hard work beats talent if talent doesn't work. So you have talent as well, and belief in yourself. But belief can actually get you through some really difficult times. You know, those low times, say, for instance, when maybe you have an injury and you're out for a little while. You know, what is it that gets you and keeps you believing that you can get back and that you can make a difference, you know? And sometimes that is just sheer will and determination.
Absolutely.
Well, you've just been through that, haven't you, Les? Like with Emile, you know, he's been out injured. I'm a massive Arsenal fan, a massive Emile fan. I love it when he plays. Singing in the sidelines. But just like, how do you cope? Like, and as a family, you know, even at this stage, you know, it's such a in no other career would you have to support your child at a time, you know, when they're in a profession, taking some time out like that. Like, how has that been?
Yeah, it's yeah, because, you know, quite often they don't actually want to talk about it, really. And that's the other balance about it, is about, you know, you can talk about football too much, you know, really you can. And so it does consume everything else. And sometimes you do have to step back and actually let the club manage quite a lot of that stuff around. You know, they have people that can help you around your mental health. They can talk about stuff. And sometimes you just need your family, you know, just supporting you, you know, just being there, just being family, doing family stuff. Because the other thing about it is no other profession is there that, you know, people seem to think that you know every little thing that goes on about your son just because, or daughter, because they're professional. Actually, they get private lives as well. You know, they need some privacy about the stuff that they do. And now he's a man, you know, he doesn't have to tell me everything, and I don't need to know everything. And so I try to support him with kind of more so around kind of thinking about, you know, let's just leave football aside now. Let's just kind of focus on kind of how you're feeling. Let's go and do some stuff that we wouldn't normally be able to because you're so busy playing football. You can actually get back to doing stuff that, and so from that perspective, yeah, it's tough for them, but it's also your role is maybe not to just keep pushing the narrative about you've got to get back and you've got to get fit and you've got to. He knows what he has to do that. The club are working with him to do that, and so. Yeah, from that point of view, you kind of step back. I mean, that's the whole idea about when they go to Colney, is that you automatically having to start pulling back anyway, because you, as I was saying, you no longer go up and watch all the training sessions. You know, if you're not picked for a game, you actually don't even go up there on the weekend. You know, so you've got to start kind of pulling back a bit yourself and thinking, you know, this is his career. I don't go into my other children's offices, like I say, you know, and ask for, you know, their BMI index and, you know, did they do 13 kilometers, you know, this on this particular match, or, you know, what plans have you got for them for kind of bulking up a bit? You know, I don't, you know, that's not the sort of thing to do. You only kind of do it with a professional athlete.
Right.
People seem to think that it just carries on forever, and it doesn't. You have to kind of let some of it go as well.
And there's a lot of, we hear about a lot of dads on the journey supporting, and obviously we're two mums on a journey. How was Emile's mum in terms of the support? Where was the balance between your footballing knowledge and perhaps
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Emile's mum is very knowledgeable about football now, more so than in the early days, because of course in the early days that was kind of a dad and a son thing, and then when it became regular Sunday league football and it was in, then it drags everybody in, because obviously one person cannot do it all on their own. Of course, some people have to if they're in that type of relationship. I get that, but when you're living together, you try and share these things out. Rightly so. And so, yeah, she just grew into it really, and like yourself is probably more knowledgeable than a lot of people about the game and how it works and why it works in particular ways. Yeah, it's yeah.
Well, it's a funny one, Les, because I feel like it's in some ways like it's the arrogance of ignorance. It's almost like the more you know, the less you know. Like I've sort of realised, like, oh, I thought I knew. Now I know I don't really know. That makes
sense. It's the song, isn't it? The more questions and answers. Like that's but that's the other thing as well. Like, we're striving to know as much about it in the hope that we can find something that will help our child along the way. The thing about elite sport is that it's a bubble. It's a lot of the time they're in a bubble a lot of the time, and the reason why they have to be in that bubble is because they can do without the distractions. You have to be 100% focused on what you're doing all the time. And family are unnecessary. They're a distraction in many ways because they're always trying to intervene and say what they think is best for their child. Well, that's great in everyday life and the day-to-day stuff that you do. But in the world of sport, the aim is to produce athletes that play in a particular way for a particular club and get results. That's pretty much what it is, and you can tell that by the dropout, and the small percentage, less than 1% make it of all the boys and girls that go for academy football. Very, very small percentage of those that can make it, But there are other reasons as well. Of course, not everybody can make it anyway. There's not enough spaces, not enough teams.
Right.
But then once you whittle that down to that knowledge of knowing that, there X amount of space, and then you've got to get to the X amount of that in the whole country, and then you're thinking about that in terms of your country and representing your country and what that means. Again, that's an even narrower band, so it's all designed to produce this kind of very small peak at the top of the pyramid. And to get there, you need a really focused individual. You need very supportive parents and extended family as well. And you need a really good friendship group as well as the individual playing the sport. So the people around you, the people that you're going to go back to. One of the reasons why, lots of clubs ask players to leave school early, say, for instance, and go up and, do their education, at the first team facility, for instance. I was not keen on that. I wanted Emile to finish his schooling with his friends, with his peers. Because my take on it was, if it doesn't work out for you, these are the people you've got to go back to. Right, so stay with them as long as you can, build those relationships up, and hopefully they'll continue with you on it. And for him, they have. So he still has the same friendship group, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? And I think I feel the same about school sports as well. That a lot of people draw away from school sports very early, because they feel it's essential that they have to do that. Whereas I found that friendship groups are again built very closely at school, and certainly Miles has, up until the other day, played his last match in year 11. So yeah, it's fun. So Les, I know a lot of people will come to you for advice and guidance on the football journey. What do you think are the top kind of 3 questions that you get asked about navigating this journey from other parents? What are people really wanting to know from you?
So, well, firstly, they're kind of wanting to know kind of how to, without saying it, how to influence the outcome in many ways, because that's the underlying factor is just, what can I do to get my son or daughter through this system, and so you know, there's no manipulating the system in many ways. What you have to do is engage with it in the right way. And I think we talked about this earlier on about how you engage with the club, and how that then brings kind of like a kind of calmness to your journey through. And look, there is no guarantee on the journey. There's lots of factors that can come into play. Injuries, for one, say, for instance. Boys and girls, their maturation times are very, very different throughout the system. So one year they can look really good, the next year they don't look that, and you're thinking, what happened? Well, they've had a growth spurt. So they're a bit like Bambi on ice. You have to wait. Will the club be, confident enough in the next year to keep them on a bit longer? So I think that's one of the things that people are kind of wondering how they can. My answer to that always is look, this is going to be a fantastic journey no matter what happens. Engage with it, enjoy it, and then hopefully you'll look back like I did and say, actually, what a brilliant journey it was. We managed to get through it. But there's been lots of other young people that have done that journey, didn't make it, but have gone on to do other things as well. I keep in contact with a lot of parents. I do this a lot. It's mainly around my job, and I'm still in contact with children that I've worked with 40 years ago, and so I try to keep in contact with people and keep things going, even if it's only a text, once a year or so. So there's that. The other thing is the retain and release. They're always that's the one thing. What can I do coming around this time that will make the difference to my son? So they might say, can I put in extra training? And I think we touched on that, and I didn't really answer that, but with Emile, I didn't do that. So this is such a pressurized environment. Why would you want to make it any more pressurized by heaping even more training on them? So for me, and I played football, the best time for you is recovery time. You need time away from this game. You need to rest and relax and do stuff with your friends, do something a bit different from football. So I never inserted any of that. Whereas a lot of people I knew, they were paying coaches, they were playing, they were playing football throughout. They play enough football already. And as a child, when you're still going through your growing phases, you don't need to keep putting extra. The whole reason why they get Osgoods and Severs is because they are doing far more activity than a normal child. You wouldn't put that sort of load on your body. And then I think the other thing is what people ask is, I can't wait. They say, I can't wait to get to your position so I can retire. That's quite an interesting. And I think a lot of people.
What do you say to that, Les?
I say I'm not retired. I still work 9 to 5, and I still work 9 to 5. I still do a lot of work over the weekends, and I get asked a lot at work, about that. But why are you still working? And I do it because the journey was Emile's. B, I really love my job. And C, you have to find something to do for yourself, because once you start pulling back from this, what do I do then? I could just go to football matches and just swan around the place, but actually, how fulfilling is it?
Boring, isn't it?
You can only play so much golf, and you can only play so much.
They want you to lie on the beach all day, Les. That's what it is.
Yeah, and so I just love what I do. I'm really keen on continuing to give something back, maybe because of the profession that I'm in. I feel I'm in a really privileged position, so I can do that. I can kind of facilitate things that other people couldn't do, that brings joy to other people, and that kind of helps other people out, and that makes me feel good about myself.
You do amazing work, really amazing.
We are your number one fans, Liz. I'm telling you. It's amazing. We love it. There is just something that we love to ask, and I feel like you've sort of touched on it, but if we could take you out a billboard, and it goes on the power leagues, and it goes on the grass pitches all up and down the land on a Sunday in a match or something, and you had this billboard, what would you put on it to other parents on this journey?
Oh, that's an interesting question, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because it's a bit like, again, because we're all so different about stuff. I would just say, remember, it's not your journey. I think it's so important that you walk alongside people, but they actually have to do it all. Your child has to do it. And you can be there to support them, pick them up when things go wrong, but you can't actually do the journey for them. And I think sometimes people forget that. and what they try and do is they try to make a difference to the child's journey, which actually doesn't really help the child. Just let them enjoy it, let it be their journey that they take, and just be there to support and help when they need it. And sometimes, sometimes children, as you know, need lots of help and support along the way. Some children, the minute you get to the gate, they just run off. They don't even want to know who you are, where you are, what are. They're just happy to go and do that. So just allow them to do it. Let them do it themselves, and just be there for when they need that help and support, really. Yeah.
Absolutely. Beautiful. No, so I think it is, I love that. But I also just want to end, I know that was supposed to be the end, but for you to summarize the journey for you and how, amazing it's been. I think it'd be nice just to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really pleased that we've had this journey, and it wouldn't have mattered to me whether it turned out that Emile had reached his goal or he didn't, and that is quite clearly evidenced by the fact that at one point he wanted to give up, and I was happy to say to him, "Do you know what? If you're not happy anymore, that's fine with me. Let's find out what it is you want to do now, and then we'll try and work towards that goal." The fact that he came back from that showed a huge amount of resilience, because it was a tough time for him, and he showed a lot of resilience, and he's having to show that now, given the injury. There's lots of ups and downs in this. It's a roller coaster ride. There's some really big highs and there's some really big lows. We've been to lots of places, visited lots of stadiums, met lots of brilliant people, and even though he plays for my opposite, I'm a Tottenham fan, and he plays for
How does that work?
And even though there's that between us, it doesn't get between our relationship.
Yeah, that's good to know.
I feel if Tottenham won, if they started to win the bloody thing, it might. Actually, Les, wait 1 minute. Let's just rewind. Because wasn't he in an England squad that won a World Cup? Did I read that?
Yeah,
correctly?
so he was in the 2000. Yeah, so that's the 2017 in Kolkata. Yeah, so like I said, these guys,
Were you there?
Yes, yeah, I went to Kolkata. It was lovely. Yeah. But it was these guys achieved so much. When I think about Emile at 22, you get A, to make it as a professional footballer, B, to win a World Cup winners medal, which is very rare. Even at youth level, it's very, very rare. To get the Arsenal number 10 shirt, to be an Arsenal player, to be an England player, and have scored a senior goal at 22 years of age. I mean, that's incredible. And even if you went on to do nothing else, you'd look back and say it's not a bad career, really, on the whole.
Lots to be thankful for.
Yeah, you've just given me goosebumps with that. It is unbelievable, isn't it? And it's what's lovely for us as well when we're talking to parents and we start to sort of see it's not that surprising if we talk to you that Emile's got that in him. Got that in his locker after talking to his dad. We could see where he might get some of that.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, he's just a little bit more, he's a bit more undercover than I am. I find that struggle, but I like to I have to, I'm a real believer that I can win, and sometimes I can't hide it.
I love that.
It's been really, really lovely to speak to you, Les. Thank you for being so generous with your time. And we'd also like people to know about the support work that you do. So we'd love to share. We've got your socials and things.
Yes, amazing.
Okay. I think it's important that people know and support wherever they can.
I think where it's important as well is for them to just understand that you do need to do something for yourself afterwards, whatever the journey is. And in particular, if you get there, what difference can you make? Now that you've in a position where you can actually kind of utilize, some of your child's star power, as it were, what difference can you make?
100%. We love that.
Well, we're going to try and get you involved in this project later because there's so much wisdom.
Not like you're not
busy
as it is, but thank you, Les.
Thanks so much, Les. We really appreciate this.
Thank you. Thanks very much.